Gideon Spring is located in the Charod Spring Nature Reserve at the foot of the Gilboa mountain ridge in the Jezreel Valley. The spring feeds into bathing pools encircled by picnic areas overlooking scenic views of the Jezreel Valley. On the hill above sits the historic home of Yoshua Henkin, who was known as the Redeemer of the land. Over a century ago, Henkin purchased vast amounts of land in this region.
Mommy. Baby.
Okay, תסתכלי עליי.
We're here today at the Gideon Springs National Park, also called Charod Springs Nature Reserve. This national park is located in the Jezreel Valley. Mommy, hang on. This national park is located at the foot of the Gilboa Mountains in the Jezreel Valley. Baby, you want to be quiet so I can talk? This national park is located at the foot of the Gilboa mountain ridge. The Jezreel Valley is named for the ancient city of Jezreel and comes from two Hebrew words, Yisra and El. Yisra means will plant and El means God. So this is the valley that God will plant or sow.
In biblical times, the valley was an important area for crop cultivation. Until today, much of Israel's grain, especially wheat and barley, is grown in the Jezreel Valley due to the fertile soil and favorable climate. In Judges 6, we read in the story of Gideon that the Israelites planted crops in the valley, but because they had sinned against God, he punished them for 7 years by allowing the Midianites, Amalekites, and other tribes from the east to destroy their crops and possessions. The Israelites hid in the mountains and caves to protect themselves and their belongings. They called out to God for help, and God sent an angel to Gideon, a humble man from the tribe of Manasseh, telling him that God would use him to deliver Israel. God promised to be with him in the battle against the Midianites. Gideon didn't understand why God had abandoned Israel and expressed doubts about his ability to save the nation due to the fact that he was the youngest person in his family, which was the weakest family in his tribe. He asked God for a sign to confirm his mission. He offered a generous sacrifice to the angel, who touched it with his staff, consumed it with fire, and then disappeared from Gideon's sight. Gideon understood that he'd seen an angel of the Lord and built an altar to God there. That night, God instructed Gideon to destroy the altar to Baal that belonged to his father and cut down the Asherah pole that stood beside it. He was instructed to take his father's bull and another 7-year-old bull, build a new altar to God on a high place, and to use the wood from the cut-up pole to sacrifice the bull on the altar. Gideon took 10 of his servants to help carry out God's instructions, but because he feared his family and the townspeople, he completed the work at night. In the morning, when the townspeople saw what had been done, they wanted to kill Gideon. His father Joash, however, said to the townspeople that if Baal was a true god, he could fight for himself against those who opposed him, so they decided not to kill Gideon. Looking at Gideon's actions from a religious and historical perspective, this story takes on deeper meaning. Baal, one of the central gods in Canaanite mythology, was the god of rain, who nourished the earth and was responsible for agricultural abundance and the prosperity of the people. The worship of Baal was widespread in Canaan and surrounding regions during biblical times, and even by later civilizations, such as the Carthaginian Empire, which produced the famous general Hannibal. Hannibal's name comes from two Hebrew words, Hanan and Baal, and means one who has received grace from Baal.
Alright, so I'm curious what the name Gideon means in Hebrew and the name HebrewBible that they gave him after.
כן, אז בעצם השם גדעון, השור שלו נגזר מהשם גידה, שזה לכרות או להשמיד. ובעצם בתוך השם גדעון מסתתרות שתי מילים, שזה גידה עוון. כלומר, מי שהשמיד או החריט את החטא. אוקיי?
Okay, so someone who's like destroying sin.
בדיוק. וזה בדיוק מה שעשה גדעון. הוא בא והשמיד את הבעל. זה גם למה קראו לו ירובל. כי ירובל זה מישהו שהוא היריב של הבעל.
Like the enemy or the warrior against the Baal, the false god.
בדיוק, כן. ובשונה מחניבל, שזה מי שהחסד של הבעל עליו, אז גדעון הוא דווקא היריב של הבעל. זה גם למה אני חושב שהשם שלו היה גדעון מלכתחילה. כי ירובעל וגדעון יש להם משמעות מאוד מאוד דומה. של מישהו שהוא משמיד והוא יריב של הבעל שהוא בעצם אחר.
It's interesting that the bull he sacrificed was 7 years old. That was the length of time the Midianites had made their lives a living hell before this story took place. The bull was a prominent symbol in Canaanite mythology and represented strength, fertility, and control. The bull was sometimes depicted alongside Baal, who was responsible for agricultural prosperity. Sacrificing this 7-year-old bull and destroying Baal symbolized the end of 7 years of oppression and devastation of their crops, livestock, and possessions. The Midianites, Amalekites, and people of the east gathered together and camped in the Jezreel Valley. The Holy Spirit came onto Gideon, who blew a trumpet to summon the Israelites to battle. Gideon sent messengers to the tribes of Manasseh, Zebulun, and Naphtali, who responded to his call and came to help him. Gideon asked God for another sign to strengthen his faith in his mission. He put a piece of wool on the threshing floor and asked God to make only the wool wet with dew, while the surrounding ground remained dry. Was there a reason that Gideon asked for this particular sign?
בעצם המים בתנ"ך מסמלים רוחניות, טהרה וחיים. אז בעצם באות הראשון גדעון רצה לראות האם יש בתוכו את הרמת הרוחניות הנדרשת כדי להוביל את העם לניצחון ולהיות שליח של אלוהים.
God shows Gideon that he is filled with the Holy Spirit, just like the pitcher was filled with the water that Gideon squeezed from the wool. After God gave Gideon the first sign, Gideon asked for the opposite, that the wool would be dry while the ground around it would be covered with dew. What was the significance of this sign for Gideon?
ובאות השני רוצה לראות האם אותה רמת רוחניות שיש בתוכו יכולה גם להתגשם בעולם שנמצא סביבו. כלומר, האם באמת הניצחון יגיע אליו ויתגשם בעולם החומרי שיש סביבו.
It was here at Charod Spring that Gideon gathered his men. To the north at Mount Moreh, the Midianites were camped. God told Gideon that he had too many men and he needed to reduce the number. So all of those who had fear in their hearts were sent home. 22,000 left, and only 10,000 remained. Still, the number was too large, and God asked Gideon to bring the men down to the water here, where he would give them a test himself.
Anyone who brought the water up to his mouth with his hands and licked it up like a dog would stay with Gideon for the battle, and those who knelt and drank directly from the water would go home and not fight. So of the 10,000 soldiers, only 300 remained. Was there a deeper meaning in the way God chose to filter and select those who would stay and fight with Gideon?
עכשיו, איך שני האותות האלה מתקשרים למה שאלוהים רצה לבדוק? האות הראשון שגדעון ביקש מתקשר למבחן הראשון שעשה אלוהים, כי אלוהים רצה לראות מי יש בתוכו גם את המעמד הרוחני הנדרש כדי להיות חלק מזה שיביא את הגאולה לעם ישראל. עכשיו, מי שיש בתוכו פחד, אין בתוכו את האמונה ואת הרוחניות של אלוהים. אז הוא כבר לא מתאים בשביל להיות חלק מזה שיביא את הגאולה לעם ישראל. והמבחן השני בעצם רוצה לבדוק מי דרך המעשים שלו והדיבורים שלו גם משקף את האמונה ואת הרוח של אלוהים. כי מי שלוקח מים דרך הידיים, כלומר מים זה רוחניות, אז כבר המעשים שלו גם ביום יום משתקפים ברוחניות ואמונה. כל מי שמלקק את המים עם הלשון שלו, אז גם מה שהוא אומר זה דברים שהם רוחניים ומשקפים את האמונה באלוהים. עכשיו גם מעניין שאלוהים אמר ספציפית מישהו שמלקק כמו כלב. המילה כלב בעברית בעצם יש בתוכה שני מילים, כלב. מה אלוהים רצה לבדוק? הוא רצה בעצם לראות שמי שהמעשים שלו והדברים שהוא אומר הם כמו הלב שלו, זה מי שהוא רוצה שיהיה חלק מהגאולה של עם ישראל. כלומר, אדם שהוא ישר, אדם שיש בתוכו כנות, ולא אדם שהוא כלפי חוץ, עושה מעשים טובים והוא אומר דברים טובים, אבל בתוכו הוא לא באמת מתכוון לזה.
After God gave Gideon another sign to ease his fear and give him confidence that he would win the battle, Gideon gathered his 300 men and they carried out a surprising military maneuver. Gideon gave the soldiers trumpets and empty jars into which they placed torches. They used the darkness to approach the vast Midianite camp from 3 directions and surrounded it on all sides. Then they blew the trumpets. broke the jars, lit their torches, and shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" The Midianite camp erupted into chaos and confusion. They attacked each other before Gideon's men had even advanced one step. The enemy army fled, and people from the surrounding Israeli tribes joined in the pursuit. 4 Midianite kings were ultimately captured and killed, and over 120,000 enemy soldiers fell. Thus God used Gideon and 300 men to bring an end to the Midianite oppression of Israel. During the period that the Ottoman Empire controlled the land of Israel, at the end of the 19th century, the Jezreel Valley, once one of the most fertile regions in Israel, had become plagued by swamps and diseases like malaria. At the time, most of the land in the valley was owned by wealthy Arab families from Lebanon and Syria, who leased it to local Arab residents. Much of the valley remained an abandoned waste, with no settlements or agriculture. Between 1882 and 1903, during the first Aliyah, about 25,000 to 35,000 Jews from Eastern Europe, Iraq, and Yemen arrived in Israel, doubling the Jewish population of the country. Among them was a man named Yoshua Hankin, who, along with his family, an agricultural family from the Soviet Union, immigrated to Israel in 1882. Yoshua Hankin's father utilized his agricultural knowledge to work the land, and they managed to sustain themselves despite the difficult conditions. They established good relations with the local Arab residents. Yoshua learned Arabic and developed connections with the Arab landowners. Yoshua felt that his life's calling was to redeem the entire land of Israel and settle it with Jewish settlement. In 1890, Yoshua began purchasing land from Arab landowners. He leveraged his connections and command of the Arabic language, and he was responsible for the purchase of about 600,000 dunams of land of the total 2 million dunams that were in Jewish ownership before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. A large portion of the land he purchased was in the Jezreel Valley, much of it bought between 1920 and 21. After significant effort, the Jews living on those lands in the Jezreel Valley succeeded in draining the swamps that plagued it with malaria, and the soil of the valley became fertile and full of life once again, as the name Jezreel suggests.
Here, Yoshua Hankin and his wife Olga are buried right next to one of the homes that they lived in for a period of time in Israel. On the sides, you can see memorial stones that list a lot of the lands that he helped to purchase and redeem from Israel. And this view overlooks, this is a lot of the valley of land of many of the places that they helped purchase.
God often chooses humble and lowly people to accomplish his purposes. Both Gideon and Joshua Hankin were simple men who, despite the fears, hardships, and dangers they faced, were used by God to bring redemption to the people and the land of Israel. What's required is integrity and faith. Is there something God is calling you to accomplish with your life?